Welcome back. I've got Dr. Shanda Gore on the line. Doctor, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am awesome. Really, really looking forward to this conversation. We talked a little bit in the pre-show about this because this is right in my wheelhouse and what I'm passionate about and what I want for organizations and individuals. So why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump into the conversation.
I'd be glad to. So, I started this journey 20 years ago talking about leadership and really getting into the nuts and bolts of what that looked like from leadership versus a management position and what that means, especially when you're talking about culture building and having efficiencies in your culture and being able to retain great, excellent employees. And so, my doctorate's in leadership. And my experience and my passion has always been in that area. And I've worked in both corporate as well in higher education. I've worked across 20 different industries. My firm, I serve as president of Mays and Associates, and we have been in business for a number of years, but we have a number of associates with a combined 75 years of working with those entrepreneurs and senior leadership and those that are succession planning, trying to think about the next generation. So I'm excited. We just passed our 22,000th individual who's been in our workshops. So I'm really excited about that too.
Yeah, that's 22,000 people, and we both know that that has a ripple effect because every person touches, who knows, hundreds, if not thousands of people. So that type of impact, really impacts the world and makes workplaces and homes and families so much better. And you mentioned something that, that's been top of mind because we're seeing this, the succession planning. We know that the baby boomer generation is definitely in retirement zone now, and will continue to be so until, 1964 when they were born is kind of the end of the baby boomer age, and then Gen X kicks up after that. So we're seeing, obviously a lot of baby boomer age individuals are retiring. We saw a bunch during the pandemic, and in many cases, we saw a lot of them retire a little bit early because they got a taste of staying at home and they went,
Right.
"Hey,
That's
I
right.
actually I actually like this." And then I know, and I had an interview the other day with a couple baby boomers that run a really successful consulting firm in the Midwest, and we got. Some Generation X, so tongue in cheek, I told them, let go of all the control, and they said, no, we won't, and we're all laughing about it, and I'm like, this is not, you know, it's a stereotype until they prove it true. And I love. Come on, my parents were baby boomers. I do some work for babyboomer.org, even though I'm Gen X. I'm not sure how that happened, but I'm thankful for it. No, it's and I interviewed Jonathan Shepard, who works runs a law firm on the East Coast, and he's huge on the generational side of things. And we've talked, and we've got all these generations that are in the workforce. We've got baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, now Gen Alpha showing up. So you've got all of these dynamics, and as a leader, each one of those little levers, and I don't want to call people a lever, but we'll just use it for this example. All these levers need different approaches.
That's
And
true. That's true.
as a leader, you have to
Hmm.
understand that it's not, and a lot of it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but from my vantage point, leadership, life, anything like that is based on your experiences. And if you obviously educate yourself or gain knowledge and experience and whatnot, you can
Hmm.
learn to adapt to different situations. But a lot of it is just based on the environment that you grew up in or a part of. And that's how you will kind of base your leadership. But unfortunately, for many of us, and I discovered this a long time ago, thankfully, that how I wanted to be led isn't necessarily how people want to be led. So you have to understand, okay, how can I best lead you in
Hmm.
order for
Hmm.
you to be the best you can be? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I totally agree. I think when you cannot use out of the box cookie cutter. leadership programs. I'm just going to say that because you have to be careful, understand the culture you're stepping into, what motivates individuals. And I have a new book, Pin Leader Path, and there are three major attributes. I've worked with executives, presidents, vice presidents, provosts across all kinds of industries. And there's three major components to effective leaders. That one is that sharpness, which you just mentioned, that experience. So they take their experience and they combine it with education so that they can lead. And there's a level of credibility and trust that goes with that. Strength of character still matters. And people want to be led by individuals they can trust. So they can trust what you're going to say and you're transparent and as far as you can be. Again, knowing that there is a number of components going on and variables, and then being able to have a plan. I can't say enough. Being able to have a plan, being straightforward with what that plan is, so people know where you're going. And, people have planned vacations better than they have planned their corporations. I mean, and just think about it, you're going on vacation. You know the date you're going, you know the date you're going to be coming back, you know what you're taking, you know how much money you're going to have. And even if there's a situation, and this is where understanding how to pivot within organizations, that's not something you just wake up one day and figure out. You go through experience to understand how to pivot, and that knowing the pivot and organizational change is going to happen. So I agree with you that there is an understanding that you have to have with what your workforce looks like. You meet them where they are because people are motivated by different things. There's a Gallup poll right now that says that in culture and workplace culture, people are very interested in that changing versus even sometimes how the money would motivate them to stay within that culture. And people are like, "What?" I'm like, "No, no. Time is the new commodity and how people spend their time is important to them." And that became even more clear, I think, with the COVID and all of those changes and work life. I wouldn't even call it balance. I call it integration, because can you really separate the two? So I'm very much, and so those three parts are a really core part of my Pin Leader Path book.
No, it's great, and I definitely recommend people. I'll have obviously a link to pick up the book in the show notes because it's really important. And I'm with you. And I do a lot of stuff on burnout, and I hear the phrase work-life balance. And another guest I had on the show a while ago, he wrote a book and he calls it work-life harmony, and he's just harmonizing it. It's balance. When I say work-life balance, the image that I share all the time is you're trying to balance an egg, have it stand straight up. And if you have an egg that will do that, throw that egg away because there's something wrong with it. Eggs aren't
That's
supposed to
right.
do that. They're
That's right.
oval. They'll be on the side, but that's not up. That's landscape mode. So throw that egg out if it can stand up. But so like, and I think that there's so much in with the therapy background that I've had, people try to be two different people. There's
Mhm.
work me and then there's home me. And while yes, there's some behaviors and dress code maybe or other things you may say at home that you wouldn't say at work, in many cases I see time and time again, they're struggling because they don't know who they are. Well, am I work me or my home me? It's like, well,
Mhm.
why are you trying to separate those?
That's right.
Find the best version of you and apply that through your 24/7. Make sure you get some sleep, please. You're gonna need that. Just saying. But I find time and time again where it's like, and I think a lot of the times that bleeds into people. I don't like going to work because they're trying to be somebody that deep down they're really not. So it's like, well, be
Mhm.
yourself. And that goes to your point about workplace culture. I'm one, publicly admit this. I love a playful workplace. I think back to the places I was fortunate enough to work for and the ones where I had the greatest bosses or supervisors. Every one of those environments were such where they were clear on what you needed to do. you showed up, you did your job, but you also had a lot of fun in interacting with your teammates and knowing each other.
Mhm.
We knew each other. We knew, I mean, we may not have gone over their house on a barbecue kind of thing, but we knew about them. We knew about their kids. We knew their spouses. We knew different things. And it seems that for some reason that was frowned upon at some point, and now you can go work someplace with somebody and be there years, and you don't know who their spouse's name is or their kids, or they have them because they may off mention something. But it's like, why are we're putting up these shields? And it's like, if you, great, you have three kids, awesome. I'm not going to hold that against you. I'm going to have, as a parent of adult children now, and I'm still struggling with that fact. But I my original career was public accounting, so I can do the math sort of. And but I see how my oldest is approaching, an age that I'm like, how is that even possible? Like, well, even side note, my mother passed away last year, so
Oh.
my oldest, we had a ceremony later in the summer, and I rode with my daughter, and she's driving, and she goes, "Wait a minute, is this the first time you've ever been in my car with me driving?" I said, "Yes, so please don't make me get out and kiss the ground like the Pope afterward." And not to poke bears or anything like that. She drives more like me than she does her other parents. So I'm thankful for that. Not that I'm the greatest driver, but I'm just saying that's the last. I don't knock her, her mom, on air, or personally not off air either. But that's like, meh. But anyway, completely off the rails on that.
No, but you know
Going.
what? But you made a great point about care. She took a moment to realize that it's the first time you've been in the car, right? In the workplace, it's the same way. You figure out who's actually who's actually paying attention to me as a person, right? And I do say that there's the three C's that really make a difference. You have to have care, you have to communicate effectively, and that creates civility in the workplace. You can't have civility in the workplace without having care and communication. So, to your point, going in a workplace and not knowing someone and really just working side by side, either in a cubicle or an office, that is not the culture that many people are seeking out. And when you recognize that, you start to realize that you can retain not just great employees, but excellent employees. Because the fact of the matter is that excellent employees have choices. They can go anywhere they want. And depending on your leadership type, and again, you got to be self aware. This is a huge part of it. You could be driving excellent employees out. And you yourself, if you're an entrepreneur, do people really want to work with you? Why not? And so those are self-reflection that it has to happen, and you have to be able to critique. I call it having like a board of directors for yourself, for your brand, beyond your parents who might say, "You're fantastic, you're wonderful." Who can tell you in these different veins? It could be from spiritual, it could be from, again, career pathways. Who can have those honest conversations with you to let you know you're going down the wrong path, or I've seen a few things you need to work on. That honesty and critique, and people being able to take it without being defensive, that's actually a skill.
Yeah, it also helps to have, I say new wife, but we've been together quite a long time. Um, she puts the capital D in direct. So she tells me what I need to hear, sometimes not what I want to, but never steered me wrong, because she knows, what I want to accomplish, and the good that I can create in this world. So
Sure.
and I love her dearly for that. I say that now. I may not say that at the moment, but when it sinks in, it's much like marinating something. If you're cooking something and you marinate, when you first take it out, it's like, yeah, it hasn't really set in. But if you let it marinate, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, there's the flavor. Okay, it's tasting good. So, there's a lot of, and I'm relatively new to cooking. I mean, over the last maybe 5 years, I used to avoid it like the plague, but then the pandemic kind of forced my hand. I'm like, all right, I'm going to learn how to do this. So now I'm getting all of these synergies between cooking and leadership and work and life. It's pretty interesting. And I've only had to use Uber Eats 2 or 3 times on a meal that I screwed up, so I like those averages. It's good, but I love what you said. Everything obviously, and especially the civility side of things. And when I encounter people or an environment where the boss or the manager is kind of rude, borderline bullying, things like that.
Mm,
I actually go back to my childhood, and I was bullied by a particular kid in elementary school for a bit, and back and forth between the teachers and the principal and all that kind of good stuff, and tried everything under the sun. And then finally, it just came to the point where I had to stand up to him and return what was going on to him. It stopped it, but found out later on, that poor kid, his home life was just an absolute shambles, single parent, all kinds of different things, and he was just trying to he was that's how he was expressing himself, and he wasn't who he was acting like, but he was behaving that way. And I see that a lot in leaders and managers where they're scared, frustrated, have anxiety, confidence issues, you name it, and that comes out in being a mean boss, direct, not caring, but it's because they're so looking and struggling within that they are struggling with being a good manager and a good leader. And those individuals, while I wish they didn't have to go through that, I love when they reach out and say, it's just not working for me. How can I change this? And
mhm,
if they're willing to do that, and you know that as well, it's like when an organization or an individual is like, it's not working for me. What can I do to make it better? If
mhm,
they're open to it, it's a wonderful journey to walk people through. And it's self-discovery, of course, but it's also giving them some ideas and experiences from other things that you've seen in
mhm,
your career. And when you do that, and you see the light bulb go on and they adjust things, all of a sudden the tide changes in the organization. Instead of having retention problems, they're having resume problems, which is they're getting too many resumes for people that want to work there, and they don't have enough roles because it's a healthy environment. And
mhm,
word word travels fast. We know the companies that are really difficult to get into, and we know the companies where, oh yeah, that's a turnstile, because it's just unfortunately a toxic cesspool of an organization right now. So I know you've seen that time and time again.
I have. And unfortunately, sometimes we get involved in mediations and investigations too, and that sometimes depending on between individuals, they could be harboring something that happened 6 years ago. That's the longest one, where something happened 6 years ago, literally, and now we're just getting to the point where we're getting it resolved. We get called in to do that work. That is culture as well. I mean, how the reaction time, the timeliness of addressing issues within a culture is so critically important. Another part that I talk about in the book, which again, I talk about intelligences that we need to use when we're, interpersonal, working with between one another, which is a big part of that. The intrapersonal, which we just talked about, Michael, about reflecting with and seeing the change happen. And you're self-reflective, you're self-aware. Emotional intelligence, big one. A number of people know about that, and then that EQ and where you fall. But one that's coming up, one that people are not talking as much about in an intelligence level, it's kind of they've removed it away, is AI, artificial intelligence playing a part. And I say this because it is playing a part on the civility within a workplace. And I've actually had, just think of the emails you might have gotten, and you're reading the email and you're trying to figure out the tone of the email. And as a leader, you might have actually written something and you know it's going to be impacting a number of people, and maybe you've written it and you've thought about it and you put in your drafts, and then you came back later and thought, I don't know how many people have said yes. You might have heard sleep on it. Don't send it right away. Think about it before you hit send. Imagine if AI wrote it for you, which AI right now is lending a helping hand. AI puts a lot of tone. It does put tone into your letter. The question is it your tone? It puts exclamation marks in. What does an exclamation mark mean? It, when you put things in caps, what does that mean? Well, people interpret it. Could be shouting, emphasis, and maybe you didn't mean to shout. And so I do a lot of work with understanding even what you're writing is setting a cultural tone. And if you're letting AI do it for you and you're not checking it or correcting it and you just let it send, you're letting AI be the leader in that position. And I will say this, AI is still, I call it a reluctant leader in my book. I call it the reluctant leader because depending on what day, if you ask AI, are you a leader? It changes its mind. And there's times when it will say, well, I guess I am. Do you want me to be a leader? Almost like an adolescent. It's growing, it's learning. And so whatever we're feeding into it is what it's giving back to us. So we have to be mindful of that last intelligence playing a part now in a workplace.
Yeah, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out, definitely
Yes.
screams true with AI. And this is a very old comment. John Dvorak, the tech writer, he's wrote for PC Magazine, probably written for a ton of other stuff. Haven't really read any of his stuff in several years because I switched to a MacBook and they just work. I don't have to deal with the tech stuff, and I don't work in IT anymore, so I don't need to keep up to speed per se on the latest technologies as far as like hardware and things like that. AI, of course, I'm heavily involved in and trying all kinds of different things just to see how it works and consult companies on it a bit just to help them use it as a tool just like we used to use printers or laptops or scanners or anything like that. It's a tool. Don't It's not a replacement. But Dvorak, this was a quarter century ago at least, they were talking about AI back then, and he says, well, before we get artificial intelligence, maybe we should focus on artificial common sense because we don't have the real stuff in many cases. And we see that, unfortunately, in a lot of challenging organizations is for some reason common sense just isn't present. And again, it goes back to what we've talked about before, just people bringing in their baggage. The example you gave a moment ago about, they've been dealing with this or this happened 6 years ago. And people carry that. Even if it was a different company, different people
Yes.
bring in that baggage. And, a book that I co-authored with Dr. Arlene Battistel several years ago, we talked about, bringing in baggage and stand-ins, for example. Someone reminds you of somebody, and all of a sudden you won't listen to them, or they, or you just kind of paint them in as a picture of, okay, they're going to be a bad boss. Of course, it could be the opposite too. You say, I used to work with somebody like that. They remind me of them. I'm going to love working with them. And it's dangerous to do that, but you again, you operate on your experiences and whatnot. But again, I think, and I completely agree with you on this. It's like AI is still a learning model. It's learning things. You can tailor it, but much like anything else, it's like, okay, I'm gonna delegate, and I look at it this way. I'm gonna delegate something to an assistant or somebody to write an email or write an article. They're gonna save it in drafts. I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna probably tweak it to make it more like me or correct something or maybe reduce the temperature in the room
Mhm.
because yeah, the exclamation mark and the all caps, use those very, very sparingly, people. If you're
Yes.
going to be excited, especially if you're going to be excited about great job, I don't know, maybe pick up the phone or go see that person in person and yell, tell them, hey, great job on that. Let them feel the physical energy and the emotion of it. And if they screwed up, tone it way down.
Mhm.
And This is where I go into dad mode, into supportive dad mode, not angry dad mode, but supportive, like, okay, all right, how does this feel? How do you think this went? Okay, what do you think we could do next time? All right,
Mhm.
here's a couple of suggestions if you're open to them, and let's talk it out. They already feel bad. In all likelihood, they already feel bad. They don't need angry dad coming in or angry mom. And it's like, let's okay, let's just bring the temperature down. It's okay. We things happen. Okay.
Mhm.
What can we do to hopefully prevent this from happening again? And it kind of takes away the sting a little bit. And when I've done that for people, you know, they they know that they made a mistake. Guess what? I have too, more than I want to count. But and again, I used to be an accountant, so I can count. I don't keep a journal of all the screw ups because I would need more books and papers. And
Well, but you'd be surprised how many people do keep track. And
yeah, well, they keep in here. Yeah,
they're keeping it in there. And I think to your point, that stand, and I think that's brilliant. And to understand that you may be using this from the past to overlay into your present. And I can't stress enough to individuals to live in the present. Some people are so hurrying trying to live in the future, or they're living in the past. They're missing out what's going on right now. And what your current circumstance is, whatever it is your present. And perception. Another thing I talk about is that, it used to say possession was 9/10 of the law. Well, I say perception is 9/10 of the law. What you perceive to be may be different than what someone else is perceiving to be, but it's your reality. And if you're staying in the present, you understand, and that works with culture as well as understanding. In the book, I talk about different case studies. And then I give you a chance. We actually have a QR code that's in the book that takes you into a community where you can talk about those case studies too. So it makes it uniquely that interactive. So you can talk to other leaders about what you think you saw within that case study. And I think it's important to understand and reflect, to take examples, real examples, situations and then really analyze it, step away from it. If you're in the middle of that circumstance, have somebody else work with you to do. That's why consultants are so very important. You're removed, you're not part of the agenda, you're not part of, I think that's really important. Get outside help, external help to help you, because sometimes you think that you can solve it. It can go on for months, and it's just it people are really in that trust mode. They like to have that objectivity, and I think it's important.
yeah, it's critically important. So I've loved this conversation, Doctor. Where can people find out more about you, your book, and all this amazing work you're doing?
So you can find out more about me at Gore.com. So that we have, I have an author site, as well as Mays Associates Ltd.com, our consulting firm as well. And we have a podcast too. So you can learn more on our Pin Leader podcast, which is now in 18 countries and 38 states. So you can follow us there and find me on LinkedIn.
And the nice thing is you don't have to travel to all those different countries to, listen. You can listen to wherever you happen to be. So
That's
I'll have all
right.
that. I'll have all that information in the show notes. So Shanda, thanks so much for your time today. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.